The pandemic, I feel like really tore the Band-Aid off and made it hard for even the more privileged workers to really fail to see that we're all getting screwed. And I think that has translated into activism.
Hello, powerful people, and welcome back to the Power at Work blog. My name is Seth Harris. I'm a senior fellow at the Burns Center for Social Change, and I'm excited to have you here for this very important blogcast about the state of union organizing in the United States in 2024. We're going to talk to leading organizers from AFSCME's District Council 37 in New York City, from SEIU's Local 9 to 5 in Seattle, Washington, and in the International Association of Machinists right here in Washington, D.C. We'll discuss workers, their attitudes towards organizing, employers' responses to organizing, and the prospects for organizing in 2024 from our guests' unique and diverse perspectives. But before we get to our panel discussion, you should know that the Power at Work blog is a proud member of the Labor Radio Podcast Network. The Labor Radio Podcast Network brings together more than 100 labor radio shows and podcasts. So if you want to learn more about the network or any of the shows that are part of the network, I encourage you to go to www.laborradionetwork.org. And if you want to listen to or download any of the Power at Work blog blogcasts in podcast form, they are available for streaming on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Overcast. Just go to your favorite commercial podcast provider and search Power at Work blog. You'll find us there. I assure you, we're there and you will find us there. And while you're there, when you find us, please give us a 5-star rating. That will help others to find our content. We will be grateful, and so will they. So thanks a lot. We're talking about worker organizing with union organizers. We'll discuss whether the worker activism that's been front page news for the last several years is still in evidence in on-the-ground organizing. We'll talk about employer opposition to union organizing and whether it's changed over the last couple of years. And we'll assess whether union organizers can generate the kind of growth in union membership that's going to be needed if we're going to reverse this decline in union density we've seen it's been going on for decades. Our guests wake up every day trying to answer the very difficult question, how can I help workers to organize effectively? How can we build worker power? And how can we grow our union's membership? But they approach that question from a lot of different perspectives. They have different personal perspectives, different backgrounds, but also they're organizing different kinds of workers in different industries. Their organizations, their unions have different priorities. So together, the conversation with our three guests today will give you a very rich, very diverse picture of what union organizing in America looks like today. Sarah Bright is the organizing director for Seattle's famed Local 9 to 5 of SEIU. Juan Eldridge is the assistant organizing director for the International Association of Machinists right here in Washington, D.C. And Indira Mohan is the associate director for organizing for AFSCME's District Council 37 in my hometown of New York City. So those are our guests. You are our audience. Let's get to our conversation about the state of union organizing in 2024. But first, I want to give you a little warning. Well, we had a technical difficulty here and there. You'll see one of our guests sort of drop out, come back, be a little bit sideways in the interview. We depend on the success of the internet, the successful operation of the internet. The internet doesn't always cooperate with us. I don't think it was a plan by anybody to undermine this union organizing conversation, but I'm paranoid enough to think that might have been possible. So there's going to be a technical glitch or here or there. The conversation continued to flow. There's a lot of great information. I want you to stick with it, even though there are some challenges. So with all of that, enjoy. Sarah, Juan, and Indira, so excited to have you here to talk about organizing. Your work is so fundamental, not just to the future of the labor movement. I think it's fundamental to the future of the country. And I want to let me start by thanking you for the work you do every day, but also thanks for being with us here today. And I want to be blunt that the reason that we wanted to have actual organizers on is that people like me, and by that I mean people who are sort of commenting at a very high level about what's going on with labor and what's going on with workers, and go on television and talk about it like we know what we're talking about. We're saying some stuff, and the sort of big question for this panel discussion is it consistent with what you're seeing on the ground? What are you hearing from workers about what they're experiencing, about their willingness to get engaged with organized labor? And what are conditions like for organizing now? Because a bunch of us are popping off, but I want the people who actually know to share what they know. And that's you all. So thanks again for being with us. And I want to jump right in. But even before we get to sort of how workers are thinking, I want to talk about you, because I know we have some people who are watching this Blogcast who would like to be union organizers. I actually worked with somebody who just the other day we were having a conversation about how do I become an organizer. I'm not going to single anybody out, but I happen to have a member of my family who's thinking about becoming a labor organizer, as well as one Sarah and I were just talking about. I have a cousin who's been a long time union organizer. So we've got people out there who want to know about this job and maybe want to do this job. And although Juan was suggesting that there's something seriously wrong with people who want to do this job, maybe that's true. Let's find that out. So they want to hear from you about what your life was like and why you did it. So before we talk about workers, let's talk about organizers. So Indira, let me start with you on this. What made you want to be a union organizer?
I would say that I was a union baby or union toddler. My parents are both union members. My mom's a member of NYSNA here in New York. My grandfather has been a member of Local 6. Oh my goodness, for 50 plus years.
Wait. Not everybody's from New York. Local 6 is the hotel and restaurant workers.
Yeah. So he was
in New York City. It's a huge local, very, very,
huge
very
local.
Influential.
Absolutely. And then my dad actually became an organizer when I was in single digits. And so that really exposed me to campaigns. He then became a rep. And so I got exposed to kind of negotiations. I mean, they would have contract negotiations at a hotel and I'd go play in the pool and kind of sit in them a little bit. So I had that exposure, and I graduated high school and had this opportunity to come in as an intern at District Council 1707, which is an affiliate of AFSCME, and kind of never looked back. And I've been doing this now for 20 something years, and organizing by passion. I've done some work as a rep, but organizing is my heart. I love this.
Yeah, organizing is birthright. I like that very much.
Absolutely.
Handed down from father to daughter. I think that's just perfect. Juan, let me ask you the same thing. How did you become an organizer? And I don't know if your family also was a family of organizers, but what did your family say when you said, you know what, I'm going to be a union organizer?
Well, it's a very similar story. I don't think I had a choice. And what I mean by that is, from the time I can remember back, similar to Indira's story is, I grew up on picket lines when I was little. I grew up at local lodge meetings running around. I grew up at district lodge meetings running around. I grew up at strike lines on picket lines. My dad was a very strong union leader, and I grew up in a blue collar house. He was a union rep for Boeing, and then he moved his way up the ranks of the Machinists Union. So it was in my DNA. It was in my heart. I became an aircraft mechanic at Cessna Aircraft at a young age, at 20 years old, and had no intention of ever becoming a shop steward or honestly even becoming a union rep, to be honest with you. And it didn't take long for me to start seeing some things that shouldn't be going on there in the shop. And I would question a lot of things that were going on. So it just happened that our shop steward moved out of the area. And, a lot of the coworkers approached me and were like, you need to study this contract book. You're going to be our next shop steward. I'm like, what? Study the contract book. They ended up nominating me to be the shop steward, and the rest from there, I was elected to a trustee. I was elected to a negotiator, assistant plant chair, a union safety rep. So I was there for 13 years, held a bunch of different numerous union hats while I was at Cessna Aircraft. And then I became a district rep for District 70, which is the largest district in the Southern Territory in Wichita, Kansas. And I was there for 3 years, doing internal organizing, external organizing. And then in 2015, I was hired by the International to become a full-time special representative, and did that until 2018 and became a Grand Lodge representative and continued organizing until here recently in January. I just got promoted by the International President as the new assistant director of the organizing department. So for me, it's in my DNA, it's in my blood, it's in my bones, it's in my heart. So yeah, that's why I'm saying I don't think I had a choice.
It sounds like the only hope we have for getting more union organizers is to work on fertility among union leaders, right? Maybe just more kids, not lots more kids. All right, Sarah. So it's something you know perfectly well because you've been around organizers for a long time and you've been an organizer for a long time. Union organizing isn't the kind of career you sort of back into or you sort of happen into, and it's certainly not a career you choose because your goal in life is to be rich. So what made you seek out an organizing career? What was it that sort of motivated you to do it?
So I actually came into it through being a worker. So it's different. I have a different path to it. When I was young and not particularly, good at planning, my husband, my then not husband, but then boyfriend, and I started a family sooner than we were prepared for. And so we ended up with a lot of medical debt and a lot of student debt and no money. And so, and no health insurance. And so we were just in that spiral that so many American families are in because of our practically non-existent safety net. And we're talking now about like 1990, 1991. And we got into a situation with our son who was starting to have ear infections. And so we were in that wonderful situation where we were choosing between medicine and dinner and rent and doctor bills. And, you get where you're like, okay, if I pay this, then I can't pay that. So then next month I have to pay that twice plus a late fee. And it just is this spiral. And so someone said to me at one point, you should really think about going to one of the grocery stores because they're union and they have these, really good health insurance. So I was like, okay, I will go check that out. And I did. And it was amazing. And so I ended up working at Safeway at my union job for like 13 years because at that time, and again, early 90s, you could work 24 hours a week. And you could get full family medical, just like every citizen in this country should have. And so I was able for 13 years to actually not only cover my family and make a decent wage, but also like be with my family and be an involved mom and be on the PTA and do all of the things that like every family should be able to do. But so many can't. And, was it my ambition? No, but we were able to not go bankrupt and we were able to take care of our family. So, but then in 2003, the Kroger and Albertsons and Safeway came together and decided to break unions across the country. And I don't know if you remember the Southern California grocery strike that started in 2003. Yeah. 4.5 months. 77,000 workers on the lines for 4.5 months. And the employers took a collective $2 billion loss. And yet we're still able to force a concessionary contract because they were able to starve out the workers. And so they it did break the union, and it's back, but it's like, ugh. So our contract was coming up after that, and I wasn't hearing anything from my union. I'd never seen a rep in the store. So I reached out to my union and I was like, hey, where are you guys? And I heard nothing back. And I reached out again. I was like, hey, where are you guys? And I heard nothing back. And so I reached out a third time and I was like, I am in touch with the media. I can't get you guys to respond to me. My media contact was a guy who wrote for the Socialist Alternative paper. And I was like, what's going on? And the next day I went to work and there was a rep waiting for me in the break room. And he was like, I hear you have questions. I was like, yeah, where are you guys? He's like, why aren't you ever at meetings? I was like, meetings? I have a life. I have kids. What do you mean meetings? And he was like, come to a union meeting. And I was like, fine. And so then I went to a union meeting, and then I went to lobby day, and then I kept on doing thing. And I realized that I had a real passion for union work. And I got involved, was on the bargaining team, was on the e-board. We merged locals together to become UFCW 21 to start pushing back against, the employers coming together and fighting against union workers. And then they asked me if I wanted to come work there, and I did. And so I have now been part of some union since 1992 and union staff since 2005. And so I worked at UFCW 21 for 6.5 years, had a family tragedy that necessitated me taking a year off, went to work for the local state WFSE, Washington Federation of State Employees, and then was recruited over to SEIU 925, and I'm now the organizing director there.
Here you are. That's great.
Here I am.
Hey, Indira, I'm going to ask you to turn your phone one click to the right because you're sideways. There we go. Good to have you back.
Thank you.
Nice we got it. No. Good to have you back. So, okay, enough about you all. Let's talk about workers, which I know is how you spend your days and how you want to spend your days. So, Juan, let me start with you, and let me give this caveat. Obviously, I don't want you to prematurely disclose any organizing drives you're involved in. I don't want you to disclose any confidences from any workers. But tell us sort of generally, and you can be as specific as you feel comfortable being specific, what kinds of workers are you and the people you're working with at the Machinists organizing right now? And tell us what got you involved with them.
Well, right now, obviously, we're a very large, diverse labor union. We organize, obviously, the aerospace industry, transportation, federal government, civilian workers, military installations, DoD bases, automotive sector, manufacturing facilities, airline, rail, healthcare. Those are pretty much who we're organizing, currently who we're organizing. So,
although you didn't mention, let me just say, my mom was a librarian. You didn't mention libraries, right? Well, you represent the Baltimore Public Library.
We do. We actually, we do represent librarians. We're, branching out into other sectors. We plan on expanding our footprint, some other critical sectors. And as you mentioned, yes, we do now represent librarians. We're kind of getting into the tech world as well. We actually have a campaign going on currently right now in Chicago with a biotech AI group. We let's see, we got some Apple workers now. We're actually in the process.
Right. Apple retail, right? Apple retail workers, right?
Apple retail. So we got some vet techs. So we do got some vet techs. We got some. Let's see what else. We're still going to continue doing, the normal traditional stuff, but we're also expanding our footprint and trying to go after and look at non-traditional sectors as well, and internal organizing. We were very successful last year doing internal organizing, pairing up with our federal union, NEFI, National Federation of Federal Employees. They have a low density, and they reached out to our department needing some support. So we put a plan together and a team together, and we went out there and were able to sign up, thousands of people last year, being able to get access directly, into these VAs and these DoD facilities and these military installations, and basically organize our unorganized workers at our organized facilities. So.
Yeah. One of the great success, I'm glad you said that. I'm glad you talked about NEFI, because one of the great success stories of the last couple of years has been the growth in union density in the federal sector. And partly that's because President Biden has taken a number of steps to make it easier for unions to communicate with the workers they represent but don't have as union members, right? Because unfortunately, the federal sector is a right to work jurisdiction, a disgrace, in my humble opinion. But the NEFI and the other federal employee unions, AFG, National Treasury Employees, NAGE, are organizing within the bargaining units they represent, and they've been tremendously successful. So I'm really glad you mentioned that. I do want to ask you about one thing, if you don't mind. I want to stay with you, Juan, just for a second. So when I was a college student, the UAW organized the service and maintenance workers on campus, and one of the almost certainly consultant-inspired communications from the university was to talk about, the auto workers don't understand you, university workers, they're nothing like you. So you're talking about a union called the International Association of Machinists and Aerospace Workers, organizing librarians, organizing in healthcare, organizing retail workers. Do employers come back at you and say, this union is a third party, they don't know anything about your work or what we do here or how we relate to one another? Does that become a talking point, and does that work anymore?
It's not. They did used to kind of, obviously these anti-union campaigns, they throw everything at us, right? And hope it sticks and hope it resonates with some of the employees. And we used to get that a little bit, but now, I think the public and the workers, they're reaching out to us. A lot of these times we do get cold, targets where we still are going in the non-traditional way, but our department, we get, I'm in charge of the organizing submissions that come in through, our website and through our affiliated unions. And we get a ton of them every week, and I disperse them to our department and to the territories appropriately. But
wait, I want to understand that. So groups of workers who are organizing, tell me if I've got this right. Groups of workers who are organizing reach out to the machinists and say, hey, we'd like your help.
Absolutely. And a lot of the times it's not the sectors that you would think. It's not the automotive and the rail and the transportation. It's the things like the apples. It's healthcare now. So we're trying to brand ourselves to the general public, to let them know, like, we're not just aerospace workers, we're not just transportation or rail, so we don't really get that too much no more. And it is a little bit of different talk sometimes when we're talking, obviously, to the employees. If I'm going out to a DoD base or a VA or a military installation, obviously I got a certain kind of speech and a talk that I talk to when I'm there, compared to when I'm going to healthcare, or depending on when I'm going to talk to these biotech lab people. It's completely different. But for the most part, we don't really get that anymore. Sometimes they'll talk to us and they'll ask us certain questions about specific questions on, like, do we have other contracts, or those type of things. But believe it or not, we don't really get it. And the companies, I think, they don't use that. We haven't got that in a long time. So I think they understand. They obviously can see that we're branching out pretty big, and we're kind of going after some non-traditional sectors now.
That's good. Can I just say that's really, really exciting? So Sarah, you work for a storied union, 9 to 5. Actually, I think you're the only union that has a song among the three that are represented here.
Yes,
but
we do.
9 to 5 started really not even as a union, really as a women's feminist advocacy organization of office workers, right, in Boston.
Right.
I just watched a great documentary that featured my former Labor Department colleague Karen Nussbaum, who's one of the founders and longtime leaders of 9 to 5. So the base, the original base of 9 to 5 was office workers, women office workers who were being atrociously discriminated against and sex segregated into low wage jobs, and
That's right.
the horror stories are truly unbelievable. Maybe not unbelievable, maybe they're completely believable, sadly. So but 9 to 5 has branched out way beyond that original base. Tell us a little bit about, again, not disclosing any, I don't want to blow up any organizing drives because we have a blogcast to talk about it, but tell us who 9 to 5 is organizing nowadays.
So to answer that, I want to tell you like who we generally represent. So SEIU broadly has different divisions. There's an early learning division, there's higher ed, there's property services, so security and custodial workers, and then there's public sector. And we are a public sector in the public sector division. And we refer to ourselves really broadly as an education union, because that anchor chapter that you're talking about here in Seattle, in like Washington State, is actually the University of Washington, where we have 7,500 classified workers who are 925 members and represented by 925. We also have organized professional staff at the University of Washington, and we're actively organizing right now about 800 professional staff at the University of Washington in different classifications. So at the UW, we represent probably at this point around 8,000 folks. And then across different K-12 districts in Washington State, we represent non-instructional classified staff, so paraeducators, bus drivers, custodial, security, a whole range of workers. Then we represent family child care providers, like 3,500 or so across the state, of these mostly really powerful women who own in-home businesses and can have up to 12 kids in their home for childcare at a time. We also represent some childcare centers and some migrant Head Start. We are doing some very large, not yet public, early learning organizing right now. And we are really going to be working going forward on building statewide standards for childcare workers, and finding a path to a union and finding a path to some kind of structural fix, because childcare, and that's really what I see as kind of the main work of the next couple of years for the growth department at 925, is to, really fight for structural fixes to childcare in Washington State.
Fascinating.
Yeah, and then we also have some local government folks. So we represent folks in King County. We represent public defenders. Like we represent a wide swath, and we also have faculty at nationwide at Antioch University.
That's really interesting. I did not know that it was as quite that public sector focused. There's a bigger story to tell about that childcare organizing that SEIU did, because that required the involvement of the government to become the employer of record, right, for those childcare providers. And so that's a big, complicated story. I'm just going to preview a little something for our audience. We'll be talking with Hamilton Nolan, who's written a book called The Hammer. We'll be talking to him at the end of the month. He's going around on a book tour right now, so we happen to be one of his stops. I'm hoping we're going to have a blogcast of it as well. And he tells the story of childcare organizing in California, also by SEIU and by AFSCME, and the process that was required in order to make that possible. But Indira, let me turn to you. So I know District Council 37 really well. I used to teach just a few blocks north of DC 37, and it's a renowned, famous institution and very well-respected institution in New York State and New York City particularly. And my recollection is that DC 37 represents something like 140,000, I may not have the number exactly right, give or take 20,000 one way or the other, but 140,000 New York City employees. So who is left for you to organize?
Good question. So DC 37, we represent about we have about 150,000 members between our public sector workers. And then a couple years ago, we unified with DC 1707, our sister union. And so now we're one big happy family. And that brought in the private nonprofit arm in the city. And so, as I mentioned earlier, DC 1707 is actually my home. And that's where a lot of our new organizing external efforts have been. Because there's so much to organize in New York. There are something like 450 or so, nonprofits that kind of fit under our umbrella. And we have, similar to some of what we just talked about already, we have daycare employees, Head Start employees, home care employees, human and social service workers, home care, right? And that's just on the private nonprofit side. But if you think about on a broader spectrum who DC 37 represents, our saying is everything from accountants to zookeepers, because we literally have everything in between. So, Botanical Gardens, Bronx Zoo, the Met, Administration for Children's Services, the City University of New York, Health and Hospitals. I mean, the list is really endless. And I'm sure you look left, you look right one way, and you're going to bump into a DC 37 member, right? I wish I had my 37 shirt on, but it says, we run New York, and we do. So.
Right. Yeah. No, that's right. And let me also say the former executive director of DC 37 now runs AFSCME, Lee Saunders,
Yes.
the former head of DC 37, now the international president, I should say,
Yes.
of AFSCME, and a terrific and very influential guy. Not just a great union leader, but also a terrific civil rights leader and a great leader for progressive causes generally. So, Lee, I'm talking to you. I'm sure you're watching. He watches us all the time.
Awesome.
You can stay up to date with the latest news about workers, worker power, and unions by subscribing to the Power at Work blog. You'll receive the weekly download, a Power at Work newsletter sent straight to your inbox. The weekly download collects about 24 of the week's articles, academic studies, press releases, podcasts, and videos from across the internet. We find the stories and deliver them directly to you. So subscribe to the weekly download right now on the front page of the Power at Work blog. Go to poweratwork.us.
Okay, so I want to turn to the question that I sort of suggested would be the overarching question for this discussion, and it's this. We hear a lot, and I certainly talk about elevated levels, rising levels of worker activism, and an increased motivation among workers to organize. Everyone quotes the Gallup survey, which tells us that everybody in America loves unions, which hasn't always been the case, and that there's a large percentage of workers who would really like to have, particularly younger workers, who would really like to have a union in their workplace. So that's the talk, right? That is the buzz, right? And you hear, hot labor summer and workers are ready, and here. Sarah, you're interacting with actual workers. Are you seeing that in your organizing? Are workers more motivated, more energized, more willing to join a union today than 5 years or 10 years or 15 years ago?
Yeah, I think so. But I think it's been that whole arc, right? Like I've been seeing this, I've been doing this. This is my 20th year as staff, and I have been seeing that uptick this entire time, I think. From my perspective, that's the way that it's been. And especially, the pandemic, I feel like really tore the Band-Aid off, and made it hard for even the more privileged workers to really fail to see that we're all getting screwed. And I think that has translated into activism. And I think seeing people come together during the pandemic, after the murder of George Floyd, to actually seeing more visible, like mass movements in America that we really haven't seen for a long time, I think has also contributed to this. I hope it's not too late. But yeah, it's exciting. I've never seen this much interest. We get contacted constantly. In fact, I'm really glad we're doing this and that we're talking about how to get into organizing, because we don't have the capacity to organize the folks who are coming to us. That's just the reality.
What say another sentence about that, or another couple of sentences about that. You don't have the capacity to respond to all the people who want to organize. Tell us what you mean by that.
I mean that there is so much need out there that I am actually in the middle of developing. I hate to even call it this, like a campaign in a box, but like tools that we can, give to workers as they contact us, especially folks who are contacting us from smaller workplaces. So, for example, let's just talk about early learning, childcare, right? My department could spend all of our time simply organizing small child care centers. And we could break our hearts doing that. And we could use all of our resources doing that. And I don't know that we would ever move a single worker forward in terms of better standards, because the problems are structural in nature, right? Can't necessarily address it by workplace by workplace organizing. But even having said that, even if it's not just about childcare centers, like we are constantly being contacted by workers who want to organize, and I don't have enough people and not enough bargainers, quite, because it's one thing just to win the election, then you have to win the contract. So yeah, sorry, that was a disconnected answer, but capacity is a huge issue for unions.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. Let me just say, America has been educated about the struggle of getting a first contract after a successful organizing drive by the behavior of Starbucks and Amazon and Trader Joe's. I think everybody has been seeing this. I want to continue on that point, Indira, with you about resources and capacity, because this is, I think folks don't really get this, that unions have, even gigantic unions like AFSCME. AFSCME has, I think, 1.1 million members nationally, but is constantly under assault all over the country, particularly in right-wing states like Florida, for example. But you're having to prioritize. So you listed a bunch of types of workers who you're trying to organize and who are probably expressing to you a willingness to organize. How do you prioritize? Because if you were a business, you would say, well, let's go after the workplaces that are going to generate the most money for us.
Right.
Is that how you think about it, or are there other ways of thinking about how you prioritize the investment of organizing resources?
I think it's also, you kind of have to really focus on the worker willingness to actually organize. Those of us who do this work know that at some point in your career, you might have been super eager and carrying a campaign all by yourself when the boss fights got tough, or when your leaders moved on to supervisory positions or other places, and so you kind of lost that momentum within the shop, and that results in a loss, right? And that's difficult. And so I think most important is that you have to have your organizing committee in its infancy kind of understanding that this campaign is their responsibility, right? And me as an organizer, as a leader in the organizing department, we're a resource to kind of help support that. But ultimately, one day I'm going to go away, someone else is going to take my place, and the union should still be strong in that space, right? And with that employer. And so when you get people focused and invested at that level early, it's easier to move campaigns kind of as they come in, instead of picking a favorite, for lack of a better word. But I agree with Sarah. We can never have enough resources in a union. And so, if I could have 100 organizers, it would still not be enough, right? If we could have 100 negotiators, it would still not be enough, because there is a lot of interest. And when I began my career, it was a different kind of worker that was coming to be organized. The workers that are coming to be organized now already have a list of people that are going to stand with them. They already have started having conversations with their coworkers. They've already set up an Excel list or a Slack channel or whatever it's called, right? Like they've already done some of the groundwork that was kind of part of our support or kind of like helping them think through those things. So they've come to the table a little more prepared now, which is helpful and huge, but you still got to get through that first contract. And that really is it's an industry challenge.
Right. Can I just say, if you're watching this and you want to be a union organizer, this is the conversation for you. You're hearing from two leaders of organizing efforts, and maybe we're going to hear Juan say something similar, saying they're looking for people. They need more organizers. If you're out there fantasizing about being an organizer and not doing anything about it, get off your you-know-what. This is your invitation to do that. Juan, I want to ask you the same question, but I want to maybe take it in a slightly different direction, building, or actually not take different direction, same direction, building on what Indira just said. So you're telling us that you're getting lots and lots of requests, submissions from workers in various workplaces in a variety of industries who would like to organize. So do you have a set of criteria or metrics that you use to determine which workplaces are going to be able to successfully get you involved? And do you communicate to the workers in the other workplaces, here's what you need to do for us to invest in sending an organizer out to work with you?
Yeah, obviously, whenever I get these submissions, the first thing I do is I look at the state, the city, the local, the type of sector, the size of the unit, and, geographically speaking, where it's at. I already know if we have districts in that area, right? Because ultimately, I got to have a district there after we end up hopefully going in there and successfully organizing and getting through a campaign. Is there going to be a district close enough or one of our locals close enough to be able to negotiate this contract? Territory going to be able to willingly negotiate this contract and service these people that we're looking at? So, depending on what the sector is and the size of it, if our department doesn't particularly work it, then I'll send it to one of our territories and have them take a look at it. Each one of our territories has what's called a TOL, a territory operations organizing leader. And so they specifically know that district and those locals in their area. So, the activism, I do agree with everybody stating that. I do think it is increasing. And, from a member standpoint, in IAM, we're working on changing the culture from all levels, from the local level to the district level to the international level. We implemented a BTO program last year. We unveiled it. And it's basically...
Wait, what is that? Tell us what BTO is.
It's a basic training for organizing. And
okay.
and so it's really not so basic. It's honestly kind of advanced, but it is basic. So what it does is it teaches the nuts and bolts of of actually finding an initial lead, what you do with that initial lead, how you make that first contact, how you build that team, how you actually get it to file an RC petition, how you, the whole process all the way to winning the election and post. And we unveiled it to the territories last year, and it's actually ran by our department. We handpicked some of our top organizing leaders, put this program together, and we're very proud of it because it's taught by actual organizers, right? So it's hands-on experience whenever we're out there, doing this education piece to whoever we're teaching it to. Whatever questions are coming up in the process of it, they're answered on the spot. We don't have to get back with them. We've been through it. We've done it. It's actual role playing and real life scenarios that we've been through. And obviously, looking at the BLS, the Bureau of Labor Statistics, polling data that I'm sure you've seen came out, beginning of this year. It backs that 71%, of Americans support unions currently, which is the highest level in nearly 60 years. And something like 88% of those are young workers.
Right.
So, that's those numbers are showing you that activism is on the incline. So, we're happy to do everything we can to keep that moving in the positive.
Yeah. So I want to ask you about this, the training. Are you training only your professional organizers, or if there's a worker in a workplace who's pulling together an organizing committee on their own and working with their coworkers and sort of laying the groundwork before you send a professional organizer? Are you also training those worker organizers, those folks from those facilities?
Well, right now we unveiled it to the territory. So our international reps, our district reps, that's where we took it at. Now, however, when it's on the ground, all of our, if it's ran by our department, everyone in our department knows how to train that person through the whole process. That's part of it. Whoever the organizer is on the ground, they definitely are the number one thing they're going to do is educate and inoculate that main lead and that whole internal team of the whole process. So everybody on our department, when we run a campaign, an organizing campaign, 100%, they're gonna be educated. It's a different training than it is that we teach the experienced organizers, because that's more of a broad thing and it's specific for the people. If we're doing rail, then we're gonna focus more on the rail. If it's transportation, if it's manufacturing, if it's aerospace. But whoever the lead organizer is from our department that actually goes out and takes on that lead and is working that organizing campaign with that internal team, they 100% are going to cater it to that group, and they will 100% inoculate and educate that inside team.
Right. But important. Not quite in campaign in a box, but training in a box to some extent. All right. So I want to turn to a conversation. We've talked about it a little bit, but now I want to really focus on it. And that is employer opposition to organizing. Well, all three of you winced when I said that, because I think you know what's coming. So Indira, let me start with you. And this will be my comment. I'm not going to ask you to make a comment on this topic, but my view is that New York's mayor is not somebody I would describe as a labor Democrat. Not going to ask you to comment on that. We'll just sort of leave that hanging out there.
Fair enough.
But I am curious. I don't want to get you in trouble. But I'm curious if you are finding, even in the public sector, but you're also organizing in the private sector, are you finding ramped up levels of employer opposition to organizing? I mean, New York is supposed to be a union town, but I think you and I both know not everybody's pro-union.
That is true. I mean, it's definitely a union town, right? But it's also an anti-union consultant town as well, right? The office I'm sitting in right now is 3 blocks from Proskauer, which is, very well-known anti-union firm. We tend to see the same sort of law firms and consultants that pop up. So like Jackson Lewis, for example, they're always present when we file a petition or engage with workers. You start seeing similar faces, right? So there's definitely a presence. And, as I mentioned, a lot of our organizing happens to be in the nonprofit world right now.
I think we lost Indira. Let me turn to you, Sarah. So you're organizing some of the lowest paid, least empowered workers in our society, childcare workers. But childcare workers don't have sort of a traditional employer. You all arranged a structure with the state that created an employer, but you're organizing childcare agencies, you're organizing other kinds of private sector and public sector employers. Employers know that a union means they lose their total control over the workplace.
That's right.
They're going to have to involve workers in the decision making. Is the level of employer opposition heightened now? Are they also ramped up in a way that worker activism is ramped up?
Yeah, I don't see a big difference in the way that they fight the organizing, right? Like, I don't see a big difference in the fight against actual worker organizing. Where I see them changing their tactics is in pushing back against the contract, right? Like, I mean, and I feel like that's deliberate, because I don't know how other unions do it, but at SEIU, when we organize, like, people don't pay dues until you go all the way through the organizing. and all the way through the contract fight and win your contract. And so if an employer is being, strategic, like it makes sense to elongate the amount of time that a union is working with workers without any kind of like dues coming in. That's what I would do if I were an employer. I think that may be part of why they are changing their tactic. Also, because I think it's harder to like actually, honestly, especially with the improvements to the organizing process, I think it's harder to like win a ULP on surface bargaining than it is
ULP is an unfair labor
practice
which is
charge.
an accusation that the employer has violated the law, and it's an accusation that's made to the National Labor Relations Board or to the state
or to
public
PERC,
employee. Right.
Exactly. So so I haven't seen a big change in like tactics around stopping an organizing drive, but like the elongation and just like the amount of delay. Like for example, when we organized Antioch faculty across the country, like they ran a really traditional academic anti-campaign that was made up of really goofy letters from the chancellor being like, don't do this, we love you, and it's all good. And it wasn't until we won that then they hired what's the firm that Starbucks uses, hired those same charmers to fight back, and it took us a really long time to win a contract, and they upped their game for the contract, and we've seen that in a few other places as well.
I think we are. My strong sense is that we're in a somewhat different time now, where employers are seemingly unafraid to break the law, and particularly when it comes to bargaining. But Juan, I want to ask you about that. There are all these brand name companies that are in the conversation right now around violating labor law by refusing to bargain or by trying to avoid unions, or bust unions by firing people and stuff like that. And people talk, as I did, about Trader Joe's, and they talk about Amazon, but you all, along with the Teamsters and the flight attendants, the Association of Flight Attendants, are involved in organizing another one of those companies, which is Delta Airlines. So what's your sense? Do you think we are now, has it changed? That's my big question. Is, has employer opposition changed? Are we at a new level as worker organizing and worker activism ramps up? Is employer opposition ramping up? It's not that they're feeling desperate because they have all the power. It's maybe that they think they need to push the pedal to the metal a little bit.
Yeah, unfortunately, I wish my story was similar to Sarah's, but in the line of work we do, we're still fighting companies pretty bad every day. Corporations, obviously, as you're well aware, they spend roughly more than $400 million a year on union bus and consultants, trying to do everything they can to stop organizing. And obviously every worker who wants to join a union should be able to without facing intimidation and harassment from the employer. Unfortunately, these are challenges that, we face during these organizing campaigns. And just like you mentioned, the resistance that, from employers like Delta, they've resorted to threats and they've resorted to anti-union tactics, and their management has threatened employees on a regular basis, threatened to terminate employees just for doing union activities. It gets pretty nasty. We are working, currently still Delta. Obviously, it's a very large nationwide campaign for our union. It is ran by our air transport territory. Our department is helping out, but it is mainly ran by our air transport territory. And it's gigantic. You're talking about 55,000 workers that make up 46 separate locations. So we're going after roughly 18,000 of that 55,000, which make up the ramp workers, cargo, and I believe the tower employees. The Teamsters are going after the technicians, and AFA, which is the Association of Flight Attendants, are going after the flight attendants. But unfortunately, we're still fighting companies on a regular basis. They know that their only defense mechanism is to intimidate scare the workers, which is unfortunate. But yeah, I definitely see that it's still on the incline, if not increasing, and they're getting more drastic and desperate.
Yeah.
The Power at Work blog is a project of the Burns Center for Social Change at Northeastern University. The Burns Center develops innovative, participatory, and equitable approaches to solving public problems using new technology. Our faculty and fellows are accomplished, nationally recognized changemakers. Interested in learning more? Go to burns.northeastern.edu and sign up for our mailing list. And you can follow us on social media at Burns Center on Twitter, LinkedIn, and Instagram. The Burns Center for Social Change, from demanding change to making it.
Okay, so I'm sorry we lost Indira. We'll hope maybe she'll come back just in time for this last big question. But here's a really big question I want to close this out with. So in order to keep the same union density rate in 2023 that America had in 2022, union membership would have had to have grown by 280,000 workers, sort of a back of the envelope calculation. You know very well that union density is the percentage of the wage and salary workers in America who are union members. But in 2023, the number of union members only grew by 139,000, which is about half of what was needed to keep union density at the same level. Now, let me just say, I tend to be an optimist about this stuff because growth is a good thing. 2023 was the second year in a row that there has been union membership growth after 5 years of union membership decline. So maybe it was a turn, but you would have liked to have seen an acceleration in the turn rather than 280,000 in year one and then 139,000 in year two. 139,000 just was not enough to keep union density at the same level, to keep it flat. Okay, so here's the big question. I'm going to put you on the spot, and you come on the Power at Work blog, that's the way it is. You get put on the spot sometimes. So do you think that organizers are going to be able to bring in enough new union members in 2024 to keep the union density rate at the same level that it was in 2023, or even at the higher level that it was in 2022?
I'll jump in.
Sarah, let me start with you.
Yes.
Can you explain?
Sure.
Can you embellish or go a little further than yes?
Yeah, I wasn't sure where you were going with that. And I guess where my yes comes from is just as you were saying that, I mean, think about what that 130 something actually means, especially for a public sector union, right? Because in order for us to even maintain, we have to work really hard, because turnover in a public sector union means we lose density, because of course it's not automatic anymore, right? We're right to starve everywhere in the public sector right now. Right. So to do just for a public sector union to just even stay steady means a constant churn of new organizing, greeting new members as they get hired in, and so on and so forth. And I think where my yes is coming from is that public sector unions are getting a lot better at that, and a lot better at understanding how important meeting members, new workers, when they come in the door and being hey, this is our community responsibility. We are union workers here. And you don't have to, but yeah, you have to, right? Come and join. Don't come to the potluck without any food. We all have to eat together, right? So I think we've gotten a lot better about that in the public sector than we have been. So I think that's a part of why yes, but even more, people are more and more motivated now, I think, than they ever have been. We organize through organizing committees, and we see workers who are just ready to fight and ready to take it on and ready to come in and do the work. And again, like I said, we are activating member leaders now and bringing them out on time loss where we can to help, because we don't have capacity and because that builds the union from within. So I think if we can just keep this going, and if we can, like, not have Trump again next for the next 4 years, I think, yeah, I'm going to go out and say yes.
Okay. That I appreciate the optimism, and it's a really, really good explanation. And speaking of, I just want to mention about the public sector that in 2023, the private sector grew. I think the number was 191,000 in the private sector, and the federal sector also grew, but the state and local sectors both shrunk. The union membership declined in those two sectors. So I'm encouraged to hear you say that you think, because that is the turn that we really need to have happen. We need to see growth in the state and local sector again in order for us to get to a higher union density rate. I think we need to see a lot more growth in the private sector as well, much more growth. But it's going to be very hard to fill the bucket if there's a hole at the bottom with state and local government employees pouring out the bottom. So,
well, and the public sector has been like the thing that has kept the levels seeming higher than they actually are for a really long time. And unfortunately, Janus versus AFSCME had the effect that it had.
Yeah, a Supreme Court decision that made all of the state and local sector right to work, along with the federal sector. Okay, Juan, I'm going to ask you the same question. Mm-hmm. Are organizers going to organize enough workers in 2024 so that the union density rate will remain at the level from 2023, which is 10%, or go back up to the level it was in 2022, which was 10.3%, I believe?
Yeah, that's a very tough question and an uphill battle, as you know. Honestly, I'm going to be a little less optimistic in one way, that I don't think we can control the density. With obviously workforce keep expanding the way it's expanding at the level that we're organizing, it's an uphill battle. All we can do is continue to think outside the box. Keep our servicing and are organizing hand in hand, because obviously your servicing and organizing go hand to hand together, and don't focus so much on servicing and forget about the organizing and forget about focus on organizing and the servicing. I come out of the servicing world before I was an organizer, so I get both sides of that. They both work hand in hand together. And also keep looking at expanding membership in critical sectors and non-traditional sectors as well for the IAM. So, as far as IAM goes, we're going to be continuing to do everything we do to do our part and continue that growth as much as we can, and continue to excel that.
Well, let me just say, winning that Delta fight would make a huge difference. That's a lot. 55,000 is a whole lot of workers. It would take. Think about how many auto plants it would take to get to 55,000 workers. That's a lot of workers. This was, can I just say, for me, an uplifting, exciting, fun, and I got to say, optimistic talk that there's room for organizers. Oh, Indira's back. Yay! I'm so glad. Yay, we got you back. Can you hear us, Indira? I don't know if she can hear us. Indira, can you hear us? I don't think we have you. Okay. I'm going to say thank you anyway. Indira Mohan, Sarah Bright, Juan Eldridge, organizers all, going out there and empowering workers. Thank you so much for being with us. Good to see you today.
Thank you.
Thank you, Seth. I appreciate it.
So did you come out of that conversation feeling as positive and as optimistic as I did? I mean, to hear that there are 3 large unions that have more groups of workers who want to organize than they have resources to organize, that is, on one hand, sort of frustrating, because you'd like them to have the capability to organize all those workers. But on the other hand, it's a really good sign about worker activism and workers understanding the need and desire to organize. I come out of the conversation feeling good, feeling optimistic, feeling like these organizers are really working their hearts out in a good cause, and that there are a lot of workers out there who would like to organize. That's a good sign. Workers understand what's in their best interest. Let me thank you all for joining this Blogcast and sticking with us until the very end. Let me ask you to do a couple more things. I'd like you to connect with us on social media. The Power at Work blog is on LinkedIn and Facebook. Just search Power at Work blog. You can find us at Power at Work blog on LinkedIn and Threads. You can find us at Power at Work on Instagram, TikTok, and Patreon. And you can find all of the video blogcasts, all of them, on YouTube. It's not a Power at Work blog YouTube channel. It's the Burns Center for Social Change YouTube channel. So if you want to watch it, you can find it there. As I said earlier, if you want to listen to it or download it, just stream it, you can find it on a commercial podcast provider. We're available in every imaginable form. Love to have you check out our content. The most important thing you can do, though, is to go to the blog or stay on the blog after you're done with this podcast. Go to the bottom of the front page and subscribe, and that way we can keep you updated on all of the content that we're posting, and we'll send you the weekly download as well. Thanks again for joining us. We will see you right here on the blog again very soon.
Public professionals, would you like to learn how data, digital innovation, and AI skills can improve your work and help you serve your constituents better? The answer is Innovate US. Innovate US offers no-cost learning on the skills you need to succeed in government in the 21st century. Attend a 1-hour weekly workshop or enroll in a course on AI or human-centered design at your own pace. It's all free to you. Visit innovate-us.org today to learn more and sign up. That's Innovate-US. Visit right now.